Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Protecting Your Wallet After a Cancer Diagnosis. My name is Monica Bryant and I am the Chief Operating Officer for Triage Cancer. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. All callers will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions or concerns, you can type them in the question or chat box to the side of your screen, and I will do my best to address them as they come up. So I'm getting the message that the sound quality is very bad. Is that any better for anybody? You can just type it in the chat box. That would be very helpful for me. All right, we're going to do our best to change things. 1 second. Thanks for your patience. Okay, take 2. You all let me know how that sound is now. All right, fantastic. Thank you all for your assistance and your feedback. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and just start over for everybody. My name is Monica Bryant, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Triage Cancer, and I'm going to be your presenter today. I appreciate your patience with our technical difficulties. A little bit of housekeeping for today. All callers will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions or concerns, you can type them in the chat box to the side of your screen, and I will do my best to address them as we go. So we wouldn't be able to provide these webinars for free or provide the free CEUs to the nurses and social workers that are with us today without the support of our generous sponsors, Novartis Oncology and Takeda Oncology. So thank you so much to them. And because we are offering CEs for today, I do just have to provide you with the following disclaimers. The presentation is intended to provide general information on the topics presented. I am not engaged in rendering any legal, medical, or professional services. I have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and we have received commercial support, but the content of this program has no relation to the commercial interests of the organization's products or services. And I have to tell you that because we are in fact providing CEs to nurses and social workers today. We are an accredited provider for nursing education by the American Nurses Credentialing Centers Commission on Accreditation, and we also are able to provide CEs to social workers because we are approved by the Association of Social Work Boards to do that. The individuals who complete the following requirements will receive 1 CE for today's program. So These are the things that you all need to do to get your contact hours or your CEs. You must have registered online for today's session. If you are listening in on a friend or colleague's computer, we won't be able to give you credit. You must attend the entire webinar as we're unable to give partial credit. At the end of the hour, you will receive an email with a link to the online evaluation and post-test. And if you complete that within 1 week of the webinar and receive a passing grade of 80% on that post-test, we will email you your CE certificates within 4 weeks. And if you have any questions about any of that, you can always feel free to reach out and email us. Now, for those of you who are logged onto the computer and can see my screen, you do not need to worry about this step. But if any of you are just on the phone, we do need you to log in via computer or smartphone and input your audio PIN so that we can in fact track your participation. Again, if you are on the computer and can see this screen, do not worry about this step. We will be able to track your participation. Now, because we have some new individuals with us on the phone, I want to just spend a few minutes talking about Triage Cancer, because we know that even after today's hour together, you may have some additional questions about finances, but also about some other issues that may come up. And so we want you to know that even after today's webinar, we are a resource for you. So for those of you who aren't aware, Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit organization that provides education on the legal and practical issues that may impact individuals who are diagnosed with cancer and their caregivers. And we do this in a couple of different ways. We host a speakers bureau of survivors and experts. We host and participate in in-person events all over the country. And we actually just reached our 50th state. So we have provided in-person events in all 50 states, DC and Guam, something we're incredibly proud of. To see where we're going to be next, you can always check out our events calendar. And then a couple of the events that we host ourselves are our Triage Cancer conferences, and we've just secured dates and locations for next year. So we'll be in California, Georgia, and Illinois. Registration for these conferences should be open soon, and these are open to anybody who has been impacted by cancer and wants to learn a little bit more. We do provide CEs for nurses, social workers, and attorneys. Then, of course, as you know, we host a monthly webinar series. Today is the final webinar of our 2019 calendar. We are in the process of putting up registration for the 2020 session. The first 2 sessions I've posted for you here, but as a reminder, all of our webinars are recorded and posted online. So if you miss a webinar or you want to go back and hear something, you can always get that information. Now, we host 2 programs specifically for healthcare professionals. The first is the in-service on navigating work and insurance, and this is an in-person event. It's all day. Again, we're coming up with our calendar for 2020, so stay tuned. And the second is the Insurance and Finance Intensive, and this is a comprehensive program for healthcare professionals, and we do a deep dive into health and disability insurance and finances. And actually, the first 2 for next year, registration is already open and available on our website. In addition to our events, we offer a number of educational materials. Our quick guides are designed to be a snapshot of a particular topic. These can all be downloaded for free. And for the healthcare professionals on the call, if you go to the link on the bottom left of the page, you can actually request hard copies of these materials to be sent to you. And we are constantly creating new materials based on feedback that we receive from the community. In the last 2 months, I think we released 7 new titles. And because we know that people learn in different ways, we've also created some animated videos on a variety of topics. And these are short 5 to 7 minute videos. They're available in English and Spanish. We also have many of our other resources available in Spanish for free download. And then we know that it can be challenging to find what you're looking for on the internet and to find reliable resources. So we've compiled the contact information for some of the most frequently used state-specific agencies on our site. And then the reality is that where you live can impact what protections you have access to. because the federal laws are only part of the equation. So we have charts of state laws on employment, disability, health insurance, estate planning available on our website so you can see what's going on in your state. And Cancer Finances is a website that we host that provides practical information on topics that can impact your finances. It's designed to guide users to information that's most relevant to their situation based on the answers they provide to certain questions. We just updated the health insurance and disability insurance sections, and I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end of the hour. Now, finally, our educational blog provides late-breaking news about what's going on in the cancer community, and then our monthly e-newsletter is where we highlight educational events and new educational resources that have come out. So with that in the background, I want to get into the heart of the topic. So we're here to talk about cancer and finances. And the reality is that we have more data than we know what to do with about how finances can impact, how cancer can impact somebody's finances. And we know that more than a quarter of cancer patient surveys report that they have to pay more for their medical care than they can afford. And we also know that this financial impact of a cancer diagnosis can take its toll on people in a variety of ways. According to a pretty well-known financial expert, fear, shame, and anger are the most common emotions associated with money. And that's true for many of us, not just those who experience a cancer diagnosis. And generally speaking, when we're talking about debt, it's much more than just about money. Being in debt can lead to a number of other emotional and psychological issues. We know that almost a third of people with high debts report severe anxiety, and cancer survivors specifically who are coping with financial burden have almost a 2 times higher odds of being depressed. And it's not just about the person who's in debt that's impacted. Debt can impact, and financial struggles can impact the entire family and put quite a bit of strain on partnerships and relationships and marriage. However, individuals who struggle to pay medical bills are certainly not alone. 56 million adults in this country have reported that they struggle to pay medical bills. And those medical bills are the #1 reason that people file for bankruptcy. In 2013, researchers from Duke took this research and looked at the financial burden of a cancer diagnosis. And in their findings, they coined a new term, financial toxicity. And this is really a play on the words that are used to describe the physical toxicity that many cancer patients experience as a side effect of their treatments. In this research, the authors focused on the financial burden of a diagnosis and how significant that burden can be, not just in an acute way when somebody's in the midst of active treatment, but also the long-term impact of that financial burden. And it's not just about one's bank account, as I've illustrated. That financial burden is causing stress and depression and anxiety, and all of those things result in a diminished quality of life. So while we now have this new term that's being used quite frequently, this is certainly not a new problem. But there's no easy solution to the problem of financial toxicity because there are multiple contributing factors. And all or most of these factors have to be addressed effectively in order to mitigate financial toxicity. Now, the primary culprit is health insurance status. So certainly not having health insurance at all is going to impact this, but not having adequate health insurance is also incredibly important, which means you could have a great policy, it's just not the right policy for you. Also, potential employment changes could impact somebody's finances, and then you don't get a pause button with a cancer diagnosis. So all of the things that would normally impact your finances in a life situation are going to continue to happen. Relationship changes, moving, graduating from school, all of those things are going to impact. So today I'm going to really focus on like sort of the bigger picture financial argument, but I will be pointing to other resources that Triage Cancer has to address some of these other issues as well. So this is a visualization of all of the questions that could be asked of people, ideally at the moment of diagnosis, but certainly at any point along their continuum of care, to help them address financial toxicity. And as you can see, it touches several aspects of somebody's life, from insurance to work to practical issues to what does their personal life look like. Now, I realize that this is a little bit hard to read on your screens, but if you go to the link at the bottom of this screen, you can download the full-size version of this checklist, and it also has all of the resources to help people address the answers to the questions posed here. So this is just a reminder that the very first step is to make sure that people have adequate health insurance and that they're effectively navigating those health insurance policies. Now, the reality is, even if somebody has the best health insurance policy for them, it's not going to completely eliminate medical bills. And often, survivors are left feeling like this guy chatting with his friend saying, well, my doctor told me to avoid any unnecessary stress, so I just didn't open his bill. This is an interesting coping strategy and not one I necessarily recommend, but there are certainly a few things that you can do to reduce the burden of these bills. So regardless of where somebody is along the continuum of care, whether they've just been diagnosed or they're done with active treatment, these are some tips for lowering bills even before people receive care, because certainly even if you're out of active treatment, you may still be receiving follow-up care or just general medical care. Communication is key with this. It can feel very awkward for some people to talk about money with their healthcare team, but it's absolutely appropriate to know what your treatment is going to cost and if there are any programs that exist to help you deal with that cost. Many hospitals have ability to pay programs or discounts or financial assistance. Some may even waive a portion of the bill. Another option might be to ask an insurance company if they have a case manager to help guide people through the process. Now, I think case managers can be incredibly helpful because you're speaking with the same person every time you call, but just keep in mind that that person still works for the health insurance company, not for you. Now, many people don't recognize that these costs that providers bill you for are not necessarily set in stone. Often, you can negotiate with providers even before you receive care to lower the cost of care. So it could be about paying a lump sum right away in exchange for a lower cost. It could be about shopping around for tests and lab work. So not all labs charge the same amount. Get a list of the tests that you're going to need and shop around for the lowest prices. Certainly, grouping follow-up appointments together may help reduce costs like co-pays for your office visits. It's not always necessarily possible, but you never know until you ask if you can group follow-up appointments. There may also be times when you can take a generic drug or a less expensive drug instead of a name brand. I would never suggest that somebody do this or change prescriptions purely based on financial reasons without talking to their providers as well, because we want to make sure someone's still receiving the most effective care. But oftentimes I hear from doctors, oh, I just write down the brand name because that's what I'm used to calling it. I don't really stop to think about what it's going to cost the patient. Now, once somebody's received care, they're going to get a ton of correspondence. So they could get 3 different pieces of mail just from their insurance company. One saying they've received a claim, one saying they're processing their claim, and then finally their explanation of benefits, or their EOB. Now, the EOB is perhaps the most important piece for people to understand and to keep an eye out for. And this is just an illustration of the types of information you might find on an EOB. Every insurance company presents this information slightly differently. But the telltale sign of an EOB is somewhere on there, it's going to have big black letters saying, this is not a bill. You'll also be able to see some information about the policyholder and who the claim is for. In this case, the policyholder is Sally, and the claim is for Sally's daughter, Little. You'll also get some information about the summary of the claim. So how much was billed, how much benefits were approved, and what the person may owe the provider. A Good EOB will also have some information and actually have words in this section, but that's not always the case. At the very minimum, there should be a date of service, some sort of code, and the amount billed. Lastly, a good EOB should have some information about how much the patient has paid towards their deductible and how much they've paid towards their out-of-pocket maximums. And this can be incredibly helpful to keep an eye out for because, again, people can make some decisions based on where they are in the year and how much they've paid towards their out-of-pocket maximums. Now, the last piece of information you're going to get is from the provider directly. This could be the hospital where you've gotten care, the doctor's office, the lab company, and this is generally speaking the amount that you're going to be responsible for. But you can't always take it at face value because these pieces of mail don't always arrive at your home in this order. For example, Sadie receives a bill for her son's last checkup and it's billed for the full amount, but she knows that her insurance company should cover at least a portion of that bill, but she hasn't gotten the EOB yet because the provider was faster to send the bill than the health insurance company was to process the claim. If she pays that provider bill, then she's going to be in a position where she has to try to get money back from the provider. So generally speaking, the rule of thumb is to make sure you wait until you've received the EOB before paying any bills. That being said, if you've received a bill and you haven't gotten the EOB, it's useful to call and communicate with the provider and explain to them why you're not paying the bill right away. I've yet to hear an example of a provider not pushing back a deadline or making a note in your file to explain why you're not paying that bill. Medical bills may keep arriving long after active treatment is over, and it's really important to stay diligent and check to make sure your bills are accurate, to dispute them if there's any problems. We'll get into appeals in just a few minutes, but if you think that a procedure should have been covered and it wasn't, making sure that you have all of this documentation for the appeals process can be very, very helpful. Now, if you have extensive bills, you may want to consider talking with a professional bill reviewer or a medical claims organization. Each is set up a little bit differently, but I've given you the link here of an alliance of for-profit claims assistance professionals, so you can find one in your area if you are interested in that service. Now, at some point along the way, you're likely to receive a claim denial where an insurance company says they're not going to pay. And as consumers, we have the right to appeal if an insurance company does in fact deny that claim. Generally speaking, there are two levels of appeals. There's an internal appeals process that will be with the insurance company specifically. And under either the Affordable Care Act or state law, every state has an external appeals process, also known as independent medical review or external medical review, and typically that's going to be run through your state health insurance agency. Now, this is one of these inherently unfair things because here we are talking about somebody who's been dealing with a serious health situation, there's all kinds of things going on, and now we're putting this burden of appealing an insurance claim on them as well. But we know that in most cases, it is worthwhile for people to appeal those denials. Somewhere between 39 to 59% of all appeals are decided in favor of the patient. So on average, we're talking about half of the time the insurance company is getting it wrong when they're denying the claim. So it really is in your best interest to do that appeal. One of the quick guides that we've just released in the last couple of months is in fact on appeals, and I've provided the link for you here. Now, it is so incredibly important to stay organized through this whole process for a variety of reasons, certainly in the appeals context, but also just generally speaking. And so we recommend that people create an organizational system. It doesn't really matter what that system is. Some people like file folders, some people like 3-ring binders, only electric files. This picture here on the right is an example of a bad organizational system. There are some pre-built planners that I've found. We actually have a webinar archived on our website from a professional certified organizer about drowning in documents. And She recommended some of these electronic medical information and personal document storage systems. We are also having her come back on January 21st. Her name is Sarah Skillen, to talk about healthy organizing. So if you too are drowning in documents, I can certainly relate. That might be a great webinar for you to join in on. The reason it's so important to stay organized is because there's a lot to keep track of, and it's not just about the medical piece, but also any sort of bills, payments, prior authorizations, correspondence you've received are all really important to keep track of for the appeals process, because some of these expenses may in fact be deductible on your income taxes. And then also, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, all of this might be very relevant for a disability insurance claim as well. Now, if you're in a situation where you owe healthcare providers or others, try talking with them. Communication is so key, but timing matters. We suggest having these communications before your debtors have turned over your unpaid bills to collection agencies. Once they're in the collection agency's hands, there's a lot less control that the provider has. If you can't make a payment, ask for more time. See if they'd be willing to negotiate a payment plan or accept a lower sum payment. This doesn't just apply to your healthcare providers, but think about anybody else you owe: landlords, student loan companies, credit card companies. You'd be surprised how flexible some creditors can be, especially if they know that you've faced a significant hardship like a cancer diagnosis. So the motto here is really, it can't hurt to try. And I recognize that this cartoon is a slight exaggeration, but it can sometimes feel like this for people who are struggling to pay bills. For those of you on the phone, this is a man reading a letter that says, "If you've already sent us your payment, please accept our apology for the death threat and warm wishes for the holiday season." We've talked about the emotional correlation that debt has for individuals, but it's important to remember that even if you owe money, you still have rights. Thanks to several legal reforms over the year, debtors have more rights when it comes to the behaviors of collection agencies. And these are just some that I've culled to really make the point that debt collectors shouldn't be harassing you. And if they are acting improperly, the Federal Trade Commission has a you can report improper behavior on their website at ftc.gov. Now, certainly, even though you have rights and you can't be harassed, there are some consequences if you don't pay your bills and you haven't arranged a plan with your debtors. So you may not be able to continue receiving care from the doctors or the providers. You may have your wages garnished, which means they take money directly from your paycheck. If you stop paying on a secured debt, which is an item like a car or a home, then that item can get taken away. And finally, you may have to declare bankruptcy so that your creditors get what's owed to them. Bankruptcy is not necessarily going to be the best solution for everybody. We generally suggest that if somebody's considering bankruptcy, they start by talking with a consumer credit counseling agency or a bankruptcy attorney. You can find reputable attorneys at Law Help, or there's some DIY options like LegalZoom. But I will say that it's important to remember that bankruptcy is not free. On average, you're going to pay about $2,500 for a single estate, and it's not quick. It can take up to 6 months. And then over the last couple of years, there have been additional rules that have made it more challenging to eliminate medical debt through the bankruptcy process. So bankruptcy may be an absolutely appropriate option for some, but we want people to really be doing their due diligence before jumping to this as an option. Now, if somebody is in a situation where they're trying to figure out what's next when it comes to their finances, that can be a really hard place to start. So I generally suggest with doing some information gathering. So this is what we call our financial big picture document. It's actually a downloadable Excel document. I've given you the link where you can download it. You can erase everything that's there and make this your own. But this is where you can collect all of the information about your assets. So anything that you own, any accounts that you have, anything that's worth anything goes in the assets column. And then your liability, which is all of your debts. And the way that this spreadsheet is set up is at the bottom, it will actually give you a number showing you your net worth. Now, this can be a little bit depressing when you first do it, especially if there's a big fat negative in front of that net worth. But this is actually something that I personally do every single year. And it has been very encouraging and rewarding year after year as I've paid down debts to see that net worth change. So it can be some really good positive reinforcement in that. But this spreadsheet also allows or has a place to put all of the information about these various accounts, the account numbers, the logins, any contact names. So it's not only a good tool for you as you're thinking about finances, but it can actually be a good estate planning tool as well. So if you have a financial power of attorney, you should make sure that they have access to this document that has all the information in one place. Now, in the process of information gathering, it's also helpful to understand what secured and unsecured debt you have. So secured debt is debt that is secured by an actual item. So the most common examples are going to be a mortgage. So you get a loan from, let's say, a bank, and if you stop paying that loan, they actually take the home away. Similarly, a car loan is secured debt. Compared with credit card debt or medical debt, which is referred to as unsecured debt. Certainly, as we've talked about, there are consequences to not paying back that debt, but one particular thing isn't necessarily going to be taken away. The next step, now that we've done some information gathering, is to ask some big picture questions. Because even if somebody had a financial plan prior to a cancer diagnosis, things may have changed. So it can be helpful to review where you are right now. And then figuring out what your financial picture looks like can help you decide which of the following steps we're going to talk about you should take. It can also help you identify priorities. So maybe your first priority is, I have to find a job. Maybe you're nowhere near that stage because you're still trying to prioritize opening the stack of bills that you've been too afraid to open. Maybe you're in a place where you're through the deepest part of it and you're ready to start thinking about building your savings or contributing to a retirement plan. So figuring out your next steps may be completely personal to your situation, but this is a starting point. So what's the current status of your finances? Did you need to take time off work? Are you back at work? Are you doing a different job that maybe pays differently because of your side effects? Are you still in school? Do you have predictable income? What are your, what assets do you have? We've talked about the secured and unsecured debt. What type of debt reduction plan sits well with you? So there are two sort of common debt reduction plans. A snowball is where you pay off your debts from the smallest to the biggest. So you get rid of the lowest balance first, and then you put all of that money that you were paying towards that to the next lowest balance. And then you snowball the amount you have towards each debt. Some people don't feel good about that at all and would rather prioritize loans and credit card balances that have the highest interest rates. The goal is to minimize the amount of interest you pay, and it might help you pay off debt faster than a snowball. So there are psychological benefits to both of these plans, but what my suggestion is you figure out what sits well with you and then you stick with it. And once you have the sense to these answers, you can figure out what the next steps are. Everybody should create a budget. And this is one of those things that is so incredibly easy for me to say, but in reality is really challenging to do. But when you create a budget, you should include any information about your income and any expenses that you have. And this shouldn't just be the expenses that you know are coming, but are there any anticipated expenses? For example, you want to include things like your monthly bills, but also, do you know that as part of your care, you're going to need 2 MRIs this coming year? And you know that on average, you pay X amount per MRI. That should go into your budget. Certainly, you can create a budget on your own, but you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. There are literally thousands of free templates available online that you can download. There's also some software options like Quicken that are relatively inexpensive that can be helpful. But when somebody's creating a budget, I really urge them to be realistic. This budget shouldn't be a reflection of what you think your budget should be, but it should be a reflection of the reality and then what's important to you. So if your glass of wine with your girlfriends every Friday is what gets you through the week and into the next treatment, then make sure you budget that glass of wine or that girls' night out into your budget. There are literally thousands of smartphone apps available to help people with their finances, and they all have a variety of costs, and then they have different goals. So you see there's a couple here that help with budgeting. There's some that help with reducing debt. These are just some that I personally poked around with, but so many of us have smartphone apps now, and so we can literally harness the power that is in the palm of our hand. But even with the smartphone apps and the free templates, it can still be really uncomfortable and overwhelming to try to do a budget yourself. And I recognize that. So if you are feeling that way, know that there are consumer credit counseling agencies that are designed to provide you with practical tools like financial calculators and budget documents. They may also be able to help you negotiate some debt solutions. You may want to think about talking with a financial planner. There is a misconception, I believe, that people think you have to have a ton of money to use a financial planner, and that's not necessarily true. We are partnered with another nonprofit called Family Reach, and they actually have a program, and I've provided the link for you here, that will match you with a pro bono financial counselor. Now, if in this process, somebody does in fact create a debt solution for you, keep in mind that that may negatively impact your credit. And a debt solution can be a lot of different things. A common example is, let's say you owe $10,000 on a credit card. The agency goes in and negotiates. If you pay the credit card $5,000 right now, they will eliminate the rest of that debt, but it is going to impact your credit. So there are 2 real things that you need to know about your credit: the score and your report. The score is a 3-digit number that really expresses to individuals how financially responsible you are. FICO is the most widely used credit score, and the scores range from 280 to 850. So the higher the number indicates the more credit worthy you are. And if you have a lower credit score, it can actually impact your ability to get additional credit, like a mortgage or a car loan. And then if you are able to get the loan and you have a lower score, you're likely going to be charged a higher interest rate for that loan. But the score is only part of the picture. You also need to look at the report. The items on the report will help determine the score, but there could in fact be mistakes on that score. And so we really want people to know that when they pull their report, they make sure everything is correct. If it's not correct, they have the right to ask a bureau to fix it. And then also to see how old the damaging information is. So credit bureau is allowed to report negative information for up to 7 years. So for example, you closed that credit card for less than you owed, and then bankruptcy information for up to 10 years. The reason that it's important to know that information is that you may be able to use timing to your advantage. For example, let's say you're trying to buy a car and you need a loan. 6.5 years ago, you negotiated a settlement to close a credit card for less than you actually owed. This is going to show up negatively on your credit report and will lower your score. But since it's only allowed to be reported for another 6 months, maybe you can actually wait 6 months before getting that car loan, so that item is no longer on your report and your score has gone up and you get a better deal. Now, certainly it's not always possible to make those choices, but if it is, having that knowledge is important. Now, if you've had a challenging financial history and your credit is not where you want it to be, it is not impossible to rebound. Just because you have that low score doesn't mean you can't get credit. So each creditor is going to set their own standards, and there are some ways to show that you've been fiscally responsible. The number one thing to do is make sure that you're paying at least the minimum due on time every month. Also, if you can keep balances at less than 30% of the card's limit, that is incredibly helpful. So for example, if you have a $5,000 limit on your credit card, make sure that there aren't balances of more than $1,500. Also, credit cards need to be used wisely. I hear many, many stories of people who have these great credit cards, but they're not necessarily the right card for them. So if you don't travel, getting a miles card is probably not the best idea. And the rewards cards don't work if you're paying a huge amount of interest on that account and you normally carry balances. So again, just making sure that you're using credit cards responsibly and wisely can make a huge impact on your financial health. And then it's important, I think, to recognize that dealing with finances in the midst of treatment or when somebody's experiencing side effects of treatment, like chemo brain, that all of this can be particularly challenging. And things like paying your bills that wasn't such a big deal prior to the cancer diagnosis can be a big deal now. And so here's just some tips that might be useful as you move forward. Most credit cards and mortgages and utility companies have an option for automatic billing. So you set it up once and then you don't have to worry about, did I remember to pay my bills? Alternatively, if you want to actively pay your bills every single month, consider using your bank's online bill pay system. You have to go in and manually schedule the bills, but then you don't have to deal with the extra steps of mailing the payments or trying to keep track of what's been sent out and what your cash balance is now because those checks haven't cleared. And then there's also a record of what's been paid. Perhaps using a spreadsheet would be useful. Down one side is all the bills you have to pay every month. Across the top are the months of the year. Each month you open the document, you put in what you paid, and then it's very easy to see, hey, is there an empty spot for a bill that I've forgotten? Also, if someone's having a particularly challenging time keeping track of all of this, consider appointing a financial power of attorney. So this is an agent who has control to help you deal with your bills. And we have some more information about that on our website under estate planning. Now, we mentioned that employment is sort of the second biggest contributing factor to financial challenges after a cancer diagnosis. And again, we have more data than we know what to do with about the problem. But what are some of the solutions? If you want or need to work through treatment, or if you're done with active treatment, but you're still experiencing some side effects that's impacting your ability to perform your job, there may be protections and tools available for you. I generally recommend the first place for people to start is with their employer. Many employers provide policies that are much more generous than the bare minimum of the laws. So does your employer have policies for things like flex time or additional breaks? Certainly there are fair employment laws, both federal and state, that provide protections from discrimination and also provide a tool called reasonable accommodations. And these reasonable accommodations can be anything from a flexible schedule to software that can help you do your job, and they're one of the most important tools to help individuals work through treatment and maintain that paycheck. We have a plethora of information about all of these rights and tools on our website. And then also, leave laws should be considered because they're not just about not working. They could really be helpful to maintain job protection if someone needs time off for appointments or days that they're not feeling well. Now, if somebody's in a situation where they can no longer work due to their disability, then disability insurance can be incredibly helpful in maintaining or replacing some lost income. And every policy is going to be a little bit different, but typically they're going to replace somewhere between 45 to 90% of your monthly income. And this can help pay for those expenses that you need to pay for monthly. Again, we have a ton of resources on the Triage Cancer website to help people understand disability insurance, including a quick guide. We have a recorded webinar. We will also be doing a live webinar in May on disability insurance. And then we have a module on cancerfinances.org on disability insurance as well. Now, the reality is, even if you've done everything that I've talked about today, sometimes there still just isn't enough money to go around. And that's where financial assistance comes into play. Generally speaking, we want people to be creative and look for perhaps non-traditional sources of income. So do you have a supplemental healthcare policy through your employer or a private employer? I cannot tell you how many people I say, well, does your employer provide this? And they say, I have no idea. And then they go back and look at their hire documents, and it turns out their employer's been paying for these policies all along. Some of these plans may pay for certain benefits. For example, if you get your cancer screenings, then they'll send you a check. Or if you've had surgery, they'll send you a check. So incredibly useful if you have access to one. Maybe you can adjust your tax deductions. So they're taking less out in taxes monthly, but then you may get a smaller refund, or you may even owe come tax time. But for some individuals, having cash now is more important. Many mortgage companies, or credit card companies have programs where they will suspend your payments if you have a disability or lose your job. Often you can use retirement plans or life insurance policies as collateral for a loan. Sometimes it might be beneficial to liquidate low earning interests, so CDs or bonds if you need cash now. Now, these are not going to be appropriate steps for everybody. And these solutions may be exactly the thing that a credit counseling agency or a financial planner can help you make decisions on. So is liquidating a low earning asset to get more cash now, in fact, going to outweigh, having to pay the fee for liquidating it early? Of course, as I think I hope I've illustrated, financial impact is not just about medical bills. And so we have a lot of resources on Triage Cancer to help people deal with finances. We also have a partnership with Needy Meds, which is another nonprofit, where we have a printable drug discount card where someone can take this discount card to a pharmacy and ask the pharmacist, what would it cost me to use this discount card instead of billing my insurance? And sometimes the out-of-pocket costs will be less using this card. But really what I think this card is useful for is it starts a conversation with the pharmacist, because the drug you need may not be in this program, but maybe there's another discount program that would be available to you. What's great about this card is you don't need to register it. One card can be used for the whole family. Healthcare professionals can download this card and print it out for their patients. But again, it's a reminder and a conversation starter at the pharmacy. There are also many, many financial assistance options out there. Some are through community organizations. Some are specific to cancer or a type of cancer. For example, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has a wonderful copay assistance program. There are some private programs. We've seen an increase over the last couple of years of people using online fundraising or crowdfunding to help deal with financial challenges. It's a great way to engage family and friends in your experience. but we generally suggest that you do so with a grain of salt. And the reason for that is because there are some ramifications in crowdfunding. So certainly disclosure is an issue. If somebody is crowdfunding, then that is widely Googleable, and if someone doesn't want to disclose their cancer diagnosis, that's a problem. It could also impact benefits that are contingent on income, for example, Medicaid or SSI. So for more information about crowdfunding and some solutions to those problems, you can take a look at our quick guide to crowdfunding. And then pharmaceutical companies also have many assistance programs. Some are about copay assistance or free drug or assistance with getting into a clinical trial, but many also will help in other ways as well that are potentially less known. So for example, many pharmaceutical companies have programs to help you deal with getting a prior authorization or getting through the appeals process. Sometimes they can be helpful to connect you to resources with non-medical costs like transportation or lodging. So if you're having challenges with any of these issues, I highly recommend that you reach out to the pharmaceutical company that makes your prescription drug and see if they have any of these programs for you. And then I've mentioned a few times, Cancer Finances also can be a resource for you. So if you go to cancerfinances.org and click Start the Toolkit, this is what you'll see. And you can click here where it says Financial Assistance Options. And then it's broken down by category. So you can use the drop-down menu to learn about resources in each of the different categories. But I typically suggest that people think outside the box and think creatively. Often people get a little bit of tunnel vision. So the challenge is, I can't pay for my co-pays. So then I will ask them, well, do you qualify for utility assistance? Yes, I think I do because of my low income. All right, so let's get you utility assistance, and then whatever money you have saved for your gas bill, we can shift to your co-payments. And so it sounds really obvious when we're just standing here talking about that, but for people who are in the thick of it, it can be hard to take a step back and think creatively. But once you pick a category on Cancer Finances, this is what you'll see. There'll be a link and a phone number and a quick description. So with that, again, I'm going to say thank you to all of you who stuck with me through the technical difficulties. And I'm happy to take some questions for our remaining time. So again, please feel free to type the question into the chat box or the question box, and I will get to some. And while I'm waiting on questions, just a quick reminder that in order to receive CEs, you must have registered online for today's session. If you were listening in on a colleague's computer, we won't be able to give you credit. You must have stuck with me until now. Complete the evaluation and post-test within 1 week. That will be emailed to you within the hour, and there will be a link for you to complete that. You have to receive a passing grade on the post-test. And if you do all of those things, you will get your certificate in the mail within 4 weeks. Also, just a reminder that I hope you will continue to have a relationship with Triage Cancer. Come back for our future webinars, take a look at our materials if you need us, and certainly connect with us on social media. Can you give an example of the types of medications that the prescription card can help with? So we have heard people getting help with all sorts of prescription medications. The most recent one was someone who I guess had a high copayment for an anti-nausea drug. And so with that card, she was able to only pay a couple of dollars. Now it doesn't go to her out-of-pocket maximum, but again, she just needed the medications at that time. I wasn't able to connect. Will your recording be available? Yes, we put all of the recordings of our webinars on our website. If you go to the webinar page at the bottom, there'll be a link to the past webinars, and they're broken down by topic. Are the 2020 events posted on your website? Not yet, but they should be very, very soon. The only ones that are up right now are the 2 insurance and finance intensives in February. I have a patient who found that it's cheaper to pay out of pocket for their test than to go through insurance. Are there any resources for that? That is a little bit challenging. Typically, if somebody has health insurance, it's a little harder to get that financial assistance specifically for the tests. But again, what I would say is, can they think creatively? Are there other types of financial assistance they might be eligible for that they have money set aside for, like utility assistance or transportation assistance? And then the money they have set aside for that can go to pay for those out-of-pocket tests. I will also say, if that's the situation that they're experiencing, then chances are the insurance policy they have is not a very good one. And we are in open enrollment for health insurance for next year for Medicare. So it's incredibly important, if someone has Medicare, to be making those decisions every single year. And we also know that many employers still have open enrollment as well. If somebody's trying to figure out how to pick a plan, I would highly recommend watching our How to Pick a Plan animated video, because it breaks down the steps relatively quickly. For out-of-pocket maximums for insurance, does it really mean any healthcare costs beyond that the patient is not responsible? So generally speaking, if somebody has met their out-of-pocket maximum for the year, they are going to an in-network provider and they are receiving services that are covered by insurance, then they will not pay any more for those services. Where we see people get into trouble where they've met their out-of-pocket maximum and they're still responsible for charges is those additional services were out of network, or they were for benefits that aren't covered by the plan. For example, they get plastic surgery to reduce the appearance of a scar, and that health insurance policy doesn't cover plastic surgery. That patient will still be responsible for paying those fees, even though they've met their out-of-pocket maximum. All right, well, we are at the end of the hour. If I didn't get to any of your questions, please feel free to reach out by email at info@triagecancer.org. And again, thank you so much for sticking with me through the technical difficulties. And I wish you all a very happy holiday season and Happy New Year, and we hope to see you back on a webinar in January. Thank you so much and have a great day.